Bell, but we're also keeping an eye on the numbers we got out this morning, the employment situation summary, what most of us call the Labor Department unemployment report. And here's what Labor Secretary Marty Walsh had to say.
This month report is a good, solid report. 850,000 jobs you can't complain about. Good growth in the leisure hospitality area and the restaurant area. We're seeing some moderate wage growth as well, which is good for workers. But it still shows that the president's economic plan is working and his vaccination plan is working. But we still have a little ways to go. The unemployment rate in the black community at 9.2%, and the Latino community 7.4%. Certainly is something that I don't want to highlight in a positive. So we have work to do there.
All right. But before you park your car in Harvard Yard, Secretary Walsh, you got to find out what's going to happen with these numbers as we go forward. Let's invite into the stream Dana Peterson, Conference Board's Chief Economist. Good to have you back. And then there's so much to talk about in what's going on here. Which do you think is the key takeaway? Was it the increase in wages, or was it that 850,000?
Well, I think you kind of have to take both, right? So on the one hand, we really did have a great outstanding number above consensus. In that range of 800 to 1 million per month, which is really necessary to whittle down that 6.7 million people who are still not working in terms of payrolls. However, there's still issues around recruitment and retention, and firms are starting to raise wages. They're offering signing bonuses. Indeed, average hourly earnings were up 5.8 or 9% in the second quarter, which is something that really puts the Fed between a rock and a hard place.
Dana, you mentioned the fact that companies have to offer incentives, certain benefits in order just to attract workers. How long do you think it's going to be in order to correct this supply-demand imbalance that we seem to have in the labor market?
Yes, well, we're thinking that closer to the end of this year that some of those supply concerns will work themselves out. Certainly, as more people are vaccinated, the fear factor should decline. As children go back to school in the fall physically, that should give parents, especially women and mothers, the opportunity to go back to the labor force. The very elevated federal unemployment benefits are going to expire in September. So all of those factors should certainly help to address the supply concerns. And I would also add that we're seeing a lot of strength in hiring in leisure and hospitality. That's because everyone's going to travel and they're going back to restaurants. Meanwhile, you still need workers there. And so as more people have a better balance of what they're buying in terms of goods and services, that should help alleviate some of the pressures on labor and hiring.
Dana, help us understand, though, what's going on with the participation rate. It doesn't seem to have moved not only in the past month, but in the past several years. And then we get, it was over 900,000 people voluntarily quitting their jobs. What is all of this telling us?
Well, certainly, if you're the Fed and you're looking at these numbers, you would certainly point to the participation rates, which are down below pre-pandemic levels for both men and women. Yes, they ticked up a little bit in June, but again, still below. And what we're seeing here is that many people have retired. Either they retired last year during the worst of the pandemic, or they benefited very strongly from gains in stock markets and 401k plans, and they're retiring early. You also had people who just dropped out of the labor market. They're not seeing the wages that they want, or they become discouraged, and they're just leaving. And so that's really weighing down the participation rate, as well as a number of the factors that I mentioned that are squeezing supply. But again, we believe that some of these supply concerns will work themselves out later on this year, and that should help lift the participation rate in our view.
Dana, a big question here from investors going into this report was what it would tell us about the potential for the Fed's policy going forward and whether or not it would cause them to move a little bit quicker than maybe we initially anticipated or stand pat. What do you think about this report? Is it strong enough in order for the Fed to maybe take action a little bit sooner than we initially expected?
I would say no. The key thing is substantial further progress. So the Fed is looking at all measures of employment. So what was mentioned earlier is that by the Labor Secretary is that unemployment rates for Black and Latino persons are still stubbornly high. When you look at the number of people who are missing from payrolls, over 6 million, close to 7 million, 50% of them are women. And so certainly I think the Fed wants to see substantial further progress in terms of broad improvements in labor market activity, not just in some areas.
Dana, just to wrap this up, there was a data point that a lot of us have paid attention to that continues to trend down, and that's the number of people who were teleworking. In June, it was 14.4% teleworking because of the coronavirus, down from 16.6%, and it's been going down. Do we have a sense of where it may finally plateau?
Well, it's not really clear, but I would imagine that it's not going to go back to the level that we saw before the pandemic. Remote work is here to stay. Many businesses are offering hybridized working models where people can spend some time working at home and some time working in the office. And indeed, some firms are going to allow some people to work from home indefinitely. And so we should see, it's not surprising that that number is falling, but I seriously doubt that it's going to return to pre-pandemic levels, according to the surveys that the Conference Board has been running around this theme.
All right. Dana Peterson is the chief economist for the Conference Board, and should point out, happy July 4th to you. We see the American flag there, and it was Canada Day yesterday. So to the folks north of the border, my relatives in Toronto, happy Canada Day.